Hello, and good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining us today here for a seat at the table. As you know, our podcast is designed to serve as a conduit that directly engages predominantly Black communities with decision makers and those with connections to those decision makers to ultimately ensure communities' needs are being met by accessing viable resources. There's no need for any long, drawn-out introductions and or any buffers. As I call her, a fiery, fierce young lady, the young lioness, is here in the studios here today at Music Man Multimedia Studios, and we're going to get right into it.
Absolutely.
What I'd like to first do is, of course, open up the mic, welcome our guest here, Miss Anna White.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for accepting. So, let's just open up with, and we jump right into it.
Mm-hmm.
So elephants in the room, elephants in the city, and that elephant is none other than Penn Live.
Yes.
So I'd just like to open up with you, delve right into how we arrived from your perspective at this point.
I would say we arrived at this point basically off of historical ignorance and disrespect. I think that, for many of us who are writers in the city, we always are looking for outlets that will be able to convey our thoughts to the community. And we know that we are much bigger than just urban Harrisburg. So we're looking for those avenues where we can be mainstream and really get our experiences to people. And just historically, from what I understand, there's just been a disconnect with Penn Live, both in what I understand historically, but also what I've seen just in reading. And Harrisburg is already designed to feel like two different worlds, and it's most clearest when people are describing it and writing it, right, and conveying it, and the imagery that comes with writing. So I just think historically we've been here because there has been a disconnect in what I call ethical behavior as writers, and not allowing for realistic or progressive movement to happen in one of the largest spaces of writers and directors of the narrative of the city with Penn Live.
So when we say, and so we're highlighting at this point, and this isn't only Penn Live, it's media in general.
Correct.
As we've discussed before. So when you say Penn Live, we think social media in that platform, but these have been ills in our community since print media.
Right.
And so we want to make sure we hone in on that. There's been issues with the old, whether you're talking about things with Bruce Bond back in Wink 104 days, so there has been things, radio, there's been television, there's been print, and now there's this virtual platform,
right?
And we still continue to run it up against the same monster issue. One of the things that we here at the station have honed in on, especially here during Black History Month, which is every month, is living in two Americas. That is a central theme. That is a thread that's going to go throughout all of our podcasts. But the other side is how we specifically talk about the importance of time periods, then, now, and next. And so maybe as a younger woman, you weren't there then, but you have some familiarity with regards to how you do research and things. So you may not have talked about being able to speak with sincere clarity on the then. You can, however, speak on the now and what you like to see next. And so let's transition into that now and then next.
Mm-hmm. So I think that print media is still important, but like you said, media as a whole, like when we are looking at things, we're looking at things at our level and then on the national level. And on the national level, I think that we are, as African Americans, more conscious of the need to be represented with dignity and facts and moving forward in a way that feels like we are empowered, right? Knowing that our history didn't just start when we landed here, knowing that we are much more than what is depicted. We do our jobs to be able to ensure that other people tell our story correctly, but when there is no space for that, that we tell our story correctly. So I just think that for us, Penn Live has never felt like it has served as a space that will tell our story correctly. And we know that on a national level, whenever there is outcry or uproar about things, that there's a lot of pacifying. So there is, we'll do better. Thanks for coming. Oh, we totally see this. And then over time, we start to say, well, it's been a while since we've asked for something and nothing has happened. And then looking to people, that know the back then, it's like, oh, honey, this is a thing. Like this just never changes. So I think for us in our time period, we have just consistently bumped heads over the way that Black and Brown experiences have been detailed when it comes to Penn Live, right? The almighty mugshots of people that are victims, or spaces in time that feels like our stories are drafted in a way that criminalizes and demoralizes, but people who do the same exact thing, but do not, the only difference is skin color. The only difference is poverty and circumstance. It's depicted as a completely different story. They humanize criminals in a way that we are not humanized when we're not even committing any crimes. So
something that you honed in on was, and I'm paraphrasing at this point, is almost returning back to our own dome, if you will.
Right.
When we continue, we as Black people, we as predominantly Black Harrisburg, continue to go back. It's almost, Stockholm syndrome, Helsinki syndrome. It's almost as if we're trusting you to do better this time, boss. We're trusting you. I know you didn't mean it, because I know that we know we sick.
Please do right by us.
Please do. We're going to trust you again. What I'm saying, what I'm seeing, what I'm saying, what we're producing, in terms of the level of brilliance, and not only brilliance in terms of individuality, but brilliance in terms of unifying, in terms of making sure that going forward, that there are like-minded, committed people. And if those people aren't committed, they'll be handled too.
Right.
Speak to that as well. When, there's some, I'm not saying specific examples, I'm saying a mindset of, no, we're not turning the other cheek. If you were truly an ally, then we're riding this thing the whole way out, or you'll be outed.
Right. So especially for Harrisburg, I've had quite a month when it comes to the idea of allyship and how to really support and center Black and Brown voices, right? I've had a great deal of explaining on what it fully means to step out when you are talking about allies, right? It's not enough to be at a march and be visual. It's enough for people standing by causes that are important to us. And I just feel like this has been a huge misstep in the city, where there's clearly a problem, right? A problem that we have not been able to tackle and conquer as Black and Brown people in this city. But there doesn't seem to be the support of allies, right? And I use that because a lot of people self-subscribe to the idea of being an ally, right? And allies are assigned positions, right? So the unassigned allies, you really don't, you just doing whatever you feel like it, right? But the people who we have assigned as allies, what is your role in taking space in Black and Brown grievances? And the misstep is always, I center myself because I want you guys to know I'm here. But when it comes to, this is the work, like I keep saying, like, this is the work. This is the part where you utilize privilege to walk into spaces of privilege and say, this person's not being heard. Excuse me, this person's talking, right? Like, that's the advocacy that's necessary. And we have too many allies and not enough support.
There you go. So let me say this. So I know there was some definition I had put out some time ago, and a couple of my Caucasian friends and allies, They were like, well, I can't believe you feel that way. I said, well, check you. First of all, I'm not asking you to feel the way that I feel.
Correct.
So I didn't ask, for your approval. I said the other side is, as my grandmother had taught me, only the kick dog hollers. So for me, it is one of those things where it's not good enough to be an ally. It's not good enough to not be racist. You have to be an anti-racist. Meaning, like even when people talk about prayer, being saying you're not racist is one thing, but being an anti-racist is an action. It's a verb. And so, like prayer, it's a verb. It's something you have to go, you have to do. And so, what I like to talk about is, how do you put somewhere, who's going to check me, boo? So how do you check them when they think they're in as allies, only when the fire gets hot to try to jump out, and you're like, no. How do you handle that?
I handle them expeditiously. Yes. I handle them by saying, hey, your word is not your bond. And one of the things is you have to call people out in what they're not, because people are really concerned about trying to portray a picture of who they are, right? I've had amazing ally experiences in Harrisburg where I feel like they have really positioned me in spaces where I otherwise would not have been, right? Or have gotten there, but probably gotten there later, right? I don't want to act like I'm just sitting here, right? But I think that there's also been spaces that when you really say, like, put your allyship where your mouth is, right? Put your allyship where your money is. Put your allyship in the work that you do, in the advocacy. It has not happened. So short of asking someone, my expectation is that you step in when I say, hey, this is an area that we need help in. And when people do not do that, I go, oh, okay, it's telling. And for me, it's, I now see where we stand. And then next time you do the super ally thing, I'm like, because at one time.
There's the great quote from Harrisburg's own Mr. Denny Green. And he says, they are who we thought they were. And we let them off the hook. But from what I'm hearing, as we move forward, this current generation, we're not letting them off the hook. And that's important. Right. So there's also a piece where, as I always say, and this is from my perspective, all my color ain't my kind. So no great movement that was embarked upon by Black people was ever sidetracked without a house nigga coming to the table. To do what? To distract, to destroy, to allow the other side in. And a lot of times, we do ourselves in. And I say that to say, just because you show up Black does not mean that you're in. And I always say Ben Carson and Clarence Thomas is Black, but I don't subscribe to their agendas. You can't take anything away from their education in terms of, where they've progressed. However, when your agendas are not aligning, that's where allyship goes by the wayside, no matter what color you are.
And I think it's important to note that, I say this a lot when I talk about ally work, is I am not concerned about how many frequent flyer miles you have in allyship, right? So you don't need to run your resume down by me. You don't need to say, I sat here, I did this, I petitioned here. Great, right? Like, I don't reward fish for swimming. And I think that sometimes people are like, you should be grateful that there's allies because without us, and I'm like, yeah, but there has to be a natural feeling of wanting to right the wrongs that existed by way of planning. Like, we did not come up with this. It is not our job to dismantle or to put down a dog that is rabid and running free that we didn't create. It is your job to pull the leash, and it is your job to be unapologetic about pulling that leash. I should not have to ask you to dismantle something you created, right? I teach my kids all the time. When you make a mess, clean it up. Don't come to me and say, if you need help with that mess, I got you. Don't say that. When you create a mess, it's part about being responsible. So if you're an ally, you assess yourself, but you also take a great deal of responsibility in righting the wrongs without being coddled or feeling like you need ultimate praise. And that, I think, is the disconnect, is that I think that unless you are consistently saying to someone, I'm so glad you're here, well done. Of course, other people will say, I don't need that. But we're talking about this city, right, where people are like, I want you to see that I'm here doing all white things to help you because you're Black. And I'm like, all right. But it's not going to be connected to a certificate. It's not going to be connected to a humanitarian award. It's not going to be connected to an NAACP award in Harrisburg, right? It's not going to come with that.
Don't be too sure.
It's not, because I was about to say the NWO, but
you love to say it on this show.
It's not going to come with that, but also welcome to our world.
Right.
Because being a Black woman is thankless when we've carried everyone on our shoulders.
Amen.
And we don't get thank yous or scholarships or reparations, or what we get is bucked at, disrespected, not protected, killed for breathing and existing. So you will find no healing to your sins here. I'm not here to do that.
Welcome to a seat at the table where we take care of our own, where it is definitely our pleasure to be your protector.
Mm-hmm.
Especially Black women. We are 3 Black males, Black men who take our jobs seriously here in the community. Our then, our now, and our next will all be intertwined around ensuring that we are here, responsible, and accountable to our community. What I like to do is ask callers to start calling in. We are going to transition to another topic, but for right now, the number will run across the screen, 717-903-8760. We're going to start taking calls. I know you don't want to hear just from me and the young lioness, but we want to have a real interactive conversation here as public and community servants, not politicians. We are here to ensure that there is a true conversation going on around the issues that you feel need to be addressed in this community. One of those things that we're going to lead into when we come back from commercial break is going to be the actual incident that has gotten us all up in the uproar with regards to Penn Live continuing disrespectful behavior. And one thing that we talked about is independent of the person, independent of the fact that we might all have a drunk aunt or a drunk uncle in the back room, we can check them,
right?
But it stays inside the house.
Mm-hmm.
So our next segment is talking about how we can do what they can't do. And it's a professional side to that, and it's a personal side to that. And I want you to touch on that, being the professional journalist that you are moving forward. So we'll be right back after this brief commercial break. Seat at the table, Karl Singleton, our special guest, Miss Anna White.
Coming at ya, round style disaster. Coming at ya, at ya. Tell you what's master. Coming at ya, round style disaster. Coming at ya, at ya. Tell you what's master. Coming at ya.
Welcome back. So during our commercial break, we were talking about transitioning, and what we talked about clearly was to make sure that we clearly define when we talk about allyship. You want to expound a bit more on that piece?
Yeah, I did want to say that I think that sometimes when we as African Americans, what I noticed, discuss the frustration that comes with people coming in an allyship or advocacy position, is oftentimes looked at as, we don't want people in this space, or, we're ungrateful, or whatever the terms are. But I think it's so important for advocates that are not people of color to really understand that there is a tone and a space in the community that is already built around trying to overcome all of these struggles, and understanding how much honor and respect and how sacred the ground of allyship is, right? So when we say you can't define it, it's not necessarily being off-putting to people, right? Because I do a lot of diversity and inclusion training in Concerned Citizens, right? I feel like that's my day job, is getting people to understand it. But I challenge people that really want to be in the allyship space to do a lot of assessment and what it takes and how serious allyship is, right? Because I think we're throwing it around like a bop, like a just like, hey, I'm an ally, right? Yeah, it's trendy. I have my Black Lives Matter shirt on. Everything's in the lanyard. I've checked up all the boxes of performative allyship. But what it really means to be allyship is so sacred that the frustration that you hear is really us making sure that people get it right, because we have suffered a history of people getting it wrong.
Correct. And that's it. So, and I talk in general about white privilege, and what I say is, I'm not accusing you of being racist. I'm not being anti anyone when I'm being pro-Black. What I am saying is, I am anti something, though, which are the racist systems that you've benefited from historically, which are those systems that are still currently in place, those artificial barriers that still exist, and those glass ceilings that are still being built. And so from my perspective, I'm just simply saying, as someone who's been on the other end, is we don't want you to be comfortable still benefiting from those systems that are in place, those constructs that are in place, and then professing to not know. We're telling you.
Yeah.
And so the action that we need from you is to not prove anything, but for assisting with dismantling those systems.
Yeah.
And so that's work.
And I think it's so weird because people are like, so you want white people to just feel bad for what happened all the time? I'm like, but do you guys want us to feel oppressed for what happened a long time ago, right? And not even a long time ago. I think people think of slavery as so archaic, right? Like it's dinosaur age. But if you really look at systemic racism and everything that has happened, you're talking about years, hundreds and hundreds of years of unpaid labor and starting at zero and then having that zero even be taken from you, right? So it's not like we're talking about a couple of years where people just did us real bogus. We're talking about generations that have been affected by what has happened. So when people think like, I've never owned a slave. Yeah, you probably didn't own a slave that was picking cotton, but you certainly have owned a slave by way of never providing promotions. You certainly have owned slaves that have never been able to read and be educated and become better than they are in spaces through education. So we have.
You have owned the slave if you're the only media outlet. You have owned the slave if you have not engaged in proper interaction with those voices that truly know what's happening in the community.
Right. Because slavery wasn't just like, hey, I really enjoy the way that people pick cotton. I really like this type of income. It was, how do we get a group of people to stay in their place mentally? And that is enslavement. So
while providing for us economically.
Correct. So it's any time where you try to position someone to stay in their place, and any time where you create spaces that automatically ensure that we don't go somewhere, that's enslavement. It's enslavement.
Once again, 717-903-8760. We're taking calls. So let's talk a bit about the Louis Butts situation. And I wanted to give you a commercial break for a second.
Give me a second.
Because there's so many levels to this, that we want to do it justice. It meaning the basis for the not only frustration, but the anger, the not outcry, but that out anger, we'll say, and expectations moving forward. Let's hone in on that without even focusing on Louis, good, bad, or indifferent. It is about making a point at this particular juncture in our lives, especially here in Harrisburg.
So I'll say that I think that the only thing that is relevant about the fact that it is Louis Butts is that he is, at least on paper, on script, somewhat notoriously known as kind of a gesture type of personality, right? Something that people turn into a caricature, so to speak, right? So the idea that he's jovial and all of these things, and when he talks, we laugh, and all of those things. So it's important to note that that is the position that the subject matter happened, right? Because I think it would have been different if it was someone that not the full with, right? So if right, there's differences, right? Because some people they play with and some people they don't, because the wrath is too much. So I think that there is something to say about the character in which they chose to create their example out of. Having said that, because it's really, you can put a paper bag over Louis at this point with Penn Live. It is the idea of, like you said, this person belongs to us, whether we don't fool with him or not. We don't care. Like, that's for us in the in-house to worry about. And by in-house, I just mean, it can be on concerned citizens. We can call him out there. We don't have to be at a dinner table. But when we say people belong to us, it's no matter how we may feel about him personally, there's still a responsibility in our Black and brown communities to ensure that people don't violate us. Because it will be Lewis on Monday, on Tuesday will be Karl, on Wednesday will be Anna. So to ensure that Wednesday doesn't come, we have to stop people on Monday.
Right. And speak a little more to, and how we delve down into it, about the personal, not personal, but the professional responsibility that was evidently lost.
Right.
In this, I won't even call it journalism.
Right. So as a writer, right, so I'm a private citizen when I write a lot of my ratchet nonsense, right? I am me. I don't really necessarily belong to an organization. So I think that I have a little bit of wiggle room to kind of be irresponsible or kind of out of pocket when it comes to what I say publicly. But when you are a newspaper outlet, when you are supposed to be a trusted source, right, you are supposed to be the factual space, unless it's an op-ed, right? But it wasn't an op-ed. It was a clear article. And those require facts. Those require balance. They require integrity and being able to speak to people, right? Like, journalists know that you're supposed to provide a space where people can kind of come to their own conclusion. Yeah. Your job is to allow people to say, oh, this person is whack or this person is great by their own responsibility. So
something you touched on there, what they did, there was 3 elements that you mentioned. What they mentioned, it was factual. However, there was a lack of balance, and I would say integrity.
Right.
So, 2 out of 3 is bad.
Yeah, and I think that it was factual to say, this is how many times this person has attempted, this is how many times this person has been unsuccessful. But when you started off crazy, that's like me saying, like, the joke of the city, Karl walked in today. It automatically sets the tone for the rest of the lens in which I'm looking at. I already know, okay, no matter how this story provides you with any type of accolades, the first initial line grabber is that you aren't to be taken seriously. And I think that really was the heart of the issue. Not that you talked about criminal past or things that can be public information, but how did you set the stage for that person? And do you set the stage like that for everybody else?
And we know the answer to that.
Right.
We live in 2 Americas.
Absolutely.
Got a quick question here from Ms. Jennifer Smallwood. It's rare that I've ever seen the community come together about the verbiage used in that article. How did you put aside your own run-ins with him by choosing to speak out? And that was a commercial break. Should we take another one?
No. And Jennifer, thank you so much for asking that. It's in our community, in my opinion, I will say that we have trouble trying to be a community, right? Like the fullness and fulfilling that, right? We've had conversations about how Black women don't feel protected by Black men here, and the intellectual labor that's taken from us and exploited, and the ways in which relationships are oftentimes. And that's not, and shout out to everyone who doesn't subscribe to that, because we have amazing men, amazing relationships, amazing Black families. But at the heart of our trauma is the idea that we cannot come together as a community. We just can't get it right because we have 20-year-old beefs, and, we all belong to the same child's father, and there's beef here, and people are still bringing up what happened when we were at the Cougars pep rally, right? So like we're 30, 40, 50, 60 still discussing it. So we have a hard time being a community because there's so much personal stuff that happens. So for me, initially, I was like, oh, I'm all about people that disrespect me drowning. I might laugh about it, right? And I subscribe to it being karma. And then I had to really look at, if you are about what you say you're about, I protect many people. So what makes him different? And the only thing that made him different was my personal issues. And that's why I was like, if the only thing that sets aside my advocacy is how I feel about somebody personally, then I'm not doing my job the way I boss up and say that I'm doing about being this community leader. I'm not true to it.
And that's what I always said. And I had to check myself as well as I matriculated and matured. Because I had to come to a lot of tables and say, I may not care about this person or care for this person, but I had to put myself on the shelf because it's about the majority.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to do what's in the best interest of the masses as opposed to the chosen few.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we're the only chosen one in the chosen few. So,
and my sister talks a lot about the death of the ego.
oh, yes.
So I think that there's a lot of ego that's happening in our community, and I'm a victim of it as well. And I try my best every day to talk about, is this representation of who I want to be, the best version of myself? And every day I'm trying to do that. Of course, we all misstep, but is everything that we are doing serving the purpose of what we're here to do? Is it serving your assignment? And I think for me, that was it. It's my assignment is to help people. My assignment is not to be caught up on who disrespects me or who does this or who does that. It was the bigger picture that we had to get across. And if that meant doing that, like, all right, I really kind of hate this person, but you not going to talk about him now, right? It's like people's relationships. Like, I had a poor experience with this person or this whatever, but that doesn't mean you're going to disrespect them.
Yeah, and that's, so where I'm at is, I think bringing it back home, no pun intended,
Mm-hmm.
is outcomes. It's not good enough for us to talk about, hey, we're pissed with Penn Live again, or we're pissed with 27 News, or 21, or 15, or Fox,
Mm-hmm.
43. What do we do from your perspective? I mean, I have a lot of ideas, but from your perspective, a call to action or calls to action, what do they look like?
Right. I think that a lot of people think that a call to action first happens outside, right? So our first thing was, we're boycotting Penn Live, and Penn Live is not going to whatever, right? The work starts with us. The work starts with, before we can move forward, we have to be on one accord. Because I can't push a movement and say, we're mad about this, and somebody behind me is like, well, I'm actually okay with it. It has to be a collective impact, right? So if you think about Rosa Parks, if everybody would have been like, I'm still fit to get on this bus anyway, I'm not doing everything. And of course, there are people that were still doing things when you asked to boycott, but there had to be a collective decision to say, this is something that will benefit all of us. And because it will benefit all of us, we have to get on one accord. We have to be willing to all sacrifice at the same level. And in that sacrifice, help each other as a community.
And I say, I used to subscribe to that, I'm going to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But there's been so much disappointed. There is not going to be 100% participation.
Mm-hmm.
The expectation is.
Yeah.
And here's my thing. If you're not participating, just
Shut
don't
up.
and just don't do nothing to sidetrack it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't announce that you're getting ready to go to the bus stop.
Right.
Get on.
Right.
Don't FaceTime that you're on the bus. Don't
Don't message like, some people feel like we need to not be on the bus, but I'm not about that life.
Right. Shout out to still going to the Gucci store, but anyway, I could use. There was in the place to remain nameless, for right now, but it's an eatery on Derry Street, between 17th and 19th, and I had said we should boycott this place, and I had a black woman call me out and say, well, I think they're all right because they have our plaque in the back office. I will never forget that. And I was like, so the plaque was where?
Yeah.
And it was, to, I guess, I don't know. She wasn't even from the city, wasn't even any of her business, but she felt compelled to this track. And I was just like, as a woman, I'm not even going to, go into my bag because that looks bad as a man.
Respect women.
Hands down. My shout out to Bernadine Woodley and Miriam Wright. So for me, it was one of those things like that was hurtful. Yeah. And I guess where we are now is, I'm saying to you as a younger movement maker, because the difference between a moment and a movement is sacrifice. Right. Shout out to Joe Madison, the Black Eagle, is sacrifice. And you are at the table. You're sacrificing being here tonight, time away from your kids, time away from your family, time away from pouring in to, your young ones currently, right now, in order to pour into everyone's young ones, every community member. So I'm encouraging you not to be sidetracked when 100% doesn't show up. I've been there.
Oh yeah, I listen. Harrisburg is sick, right? So in the work that I do with mental health, I can tell when people are living in trauma and when people are defensive and when people are in survival mode and when people's poverty mindset won't let them trust people or the word of people, right? So I get it. We're not going to have 100% buy-in, and we might have if we didn't have so many trust issues and fumbles with people who we did trust, right? There's a lot of that PTSD where somebody put their real faith in someone and was completely disappointed. I get it, right? But I look at it as this person's not going to appreciate that I just did that for them and they acted a complete nut for me standing up for them. The next person won't. I hope the next person won't. Because if I give up, then I turn into the monster that I'm trying to change. And the thing is, we have to understand that we're not going to get any gratitude for this.
Yeah.
We are happy about it, but we know that our job is thankless. So we look for those opportunities when we are brought to the table, when we are thanked in ways that aren't traditional, or when we're not, centered. But I get it. We're not going to have 100% buy-in. But like you said, I think we just do it. We go hard at opposing. We go hard. And it's the idea of, well, Breonna Taylor is not in Harrisburg. I don't need to worry about it. And so Breonna Taylor is XYZ from 6th Street.
But let's pause on that for a second. I find that we do go hard for Breonna Taylor or George Floyd or Eric Gardner or Tamir Rice.
But not local people.
But not local people. And that's just an observation. What are your thoughts on that? I think we are trendy in a way where, outside's ice is colder.
I know exactly why. Breonna Taylor didn't sleep with nobody's baby's dad. Yeah. Breonna Taylor didn't not feed you when you needed to be fed. Breonna Taylor doesn't have historical beef with you. Breonna Taylor never stole money from you. Breonna Taylor wasn't on the school board and did you grimy, right? There's a disconnect because Breonna Taylor is a figure. She represents something. We don't know her intimately. But I know Karl. I know what Karl did to me. So when something happens to Karl, I'm like, the intimate level and the distrust and the sins that we have casted out is the reason why we don't protect our own. But also I think it's it speaks to the level of apathy. The level of, I have my own things to worry about. That's not my family, right? Like, yes, that person died, but that's not me. I have to worry about so much. So to our, I don't want to say to our credit, but if it's any consolation, we have to be clear that when you are in a trauma situation, when you are in survival mode, you have so much going on that you don't even have a space to pour into anybody to care. Like, that's the mental health part, is that I feel like people do care. They want to care, but they lost a brother and they don't want to be re-traumatized by being there and being reminded. So I always give people a benefit of the doubt that if you weren't so caught up in everything that was going on with you, you might care. Or sometimes people are scum and they don't care, and that's okay also.
That's true. I mean, there's all types that are walking this
right.
Where we are in terms of an outlet, in terms of ensuring that we have a space. We're simply saying, well, go ahead. What's your thoughts? Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm going to let you finish.
No,
go ahead.
No.
Please go.
I want you to.
Our outlets have to, remember I said it has to start with us. So we can't say, Penn Live, if you don't do this, we're going to go back to our newspapers. You can't say that when you're paying me $20 an article, but you're talking about generational wealth and Black wealth and excellence. Because you are not much higher than the oppression that we're discussing. Right. So if you find value in people, if we're going to sacrifice and not make our bread over here, because make no mistake, Penn Live could say tomorrow, like, okay, and I see value in you, I'm about to pay you this bread. And some have done it for less. I'm not about to be there because I just completely trashed y'all, so I don't feel comfortable, right? But somebody else would say that's where the money resides.
Well, that's, and there is a history of even I'll just say, even how the political game it was all messed up by, there used to be volunteers at the poll workers, this, that, and the other. But now it's like, once they introduced that money to work in the poll, and I'll say, I'll use me. I had a lot of people when I, ran, that I saw passing out literature for Ron Buxton at the time, back in '08, and we were friends and everything. And they would say, Pi, well, look, I'm voting for you, but I'm getting X amount of dollars over here. And I didn't have the money to give them. And so I understood that. And I was hurt. I was mad. I was all those emotions. But then I had to think about it. Education. Educate them. And I would say to them, I'd rather you go in and vote for the opponent as opposed to staying out here for 3 hours and pass out literature for that person.
For scraps.
Pass it out for me. Pass out the literature for me. And then we started doing some other things, even though the money was there, but
because the influence of that.
Yeah.
People are just like, I'm just working for white people. It doesn't matter. Like, we're not. I'm still here.
Your friend. I'm still with you. I'm still, and then but that's an education piece.
Right.
And we talked earlier about the Stockholm syndrome and the not understanding, and then you have to. Sometimes it's the gift and the curse at the same time, where you are afforded opportunities to have access to information or knowledge, or you've done certain things. And because you don't look down, or we don't think we're better than anybody, we assume that everybody knows this.
Right.
But in reality, everyone doesn't know.
They do not.
And so ignorance is not a negative thing, just not knowing.
Knowledge is not common sense.
Right. So as they say, what Dr. King said, the two most dangerous things are sincere ignorance and conscious stupidity. So what we'll say is, talking about spaces, what we're building here is 100% Black owned and controlled. It is something that is open. It is a platform. It is something that me in the control room don't always agree, but we come to consensus around the majority of what's best for everyone. And so that's the type of space that we are creating here. That's the type of space that we want to ensure is that permeates the community. And they're not all those decision makers at the table aren't always going to look like they look tonight. Right. And that's okay too. But what we will say is there is, to your point, there is a level of accountability and responsibility to start with self, internalizing things, enhancing yourself, and then coming out ready, prepared, properly armed, and then staying consistent. What do you say needs to be done in terms of what do we need to remain, not the state, but just us as a community, need to remain consistently engaged with in order to see the desirable change?
I think that we have to just be checking in with one another, right? Like, sacrifice is hard. Asking somebody to not work somewhere when you can't help supplement that is hard, right? We're not living back in a day where I feel like people sacrifice, but also there was a sense that because you sacrifice, I got you.
Right.
There's not that sense, right? It's like, well, if I lose my job, what are you doing? They're like, but you'll feel good. I don't care about feeling good. I'm also going to feel hungry, broke, cold because I'm outside. So the sacrifice, I don't think is the issue. I feel like people would sacrifice if they could see how it could be feasibly done. But we have such a breakdown in village that I can't even ask the person next door for something to eat. Because next thing you know, you're talking about me, you're bashing me to 3 other people, and then I can't go outside, and now you done call CYS on me or told my kid's dad that I didn't have any bread, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So it's on and on and on. So I think we need to build our villages back. And once we build our villages and communities together, it will end up working out for us.
Right. We had a question. I just lost it. But I guess so. One of the things that, another thing, all right, here we go. Charlotte Plains, that was my before and after school teacher. Shout out to the Marcus Garvey program, before and after school. Kudos on responding back to the community on Butt's behalf. Question is, was there a letter to the editor sent so Penn Live knows the fury Charles Thompson's article caused? I'm sorry, Charles Thompson's article.
I didn't feel like that was my place. Let me also say
well, just was there one? Not that you had to do it.
You have to ask people who cared about it, right? Because there was a 500 post thread about how everyone was concerned, but I didn't see his camp say anything. I didn't hear him say anything. I didn't hear, and there were certainly people that were ready to do it. But to answer your question, I don't think that happened. I think for me, I just utilize Facebook differently, right? So I know that there's 3,000 people watching on Concerned Citizens. I feel like that's where I list my grievance because that's where they're watching, right? That's where the mayor's watching, the cops are watching, the ops are watching, everybody's watching. So to do something publicly and to ask publicly, I feel like that's the new age list of demand space, right? So you have those Black demands, and I'm on here. So I just think it's the use of technology that I chose to use when I made my specific demands about what I thought should happen.
Yeah. So with that, I mean, people are willing. I'm one of those people. Obviously, for obvious reasons, because we have a place to go. So it's like the person who's involved with pharmaceutical on the corners. I can't approach that person and say, hey, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, if they're in survival mode, unless, to your earlier point, I'm willing to replace that activity that is obviously hurting our community with something else that's going to be useful and helpful, beneficial, mutually beneficial, not only to the community, but to that young person or that older person as well. And so what I'm saying is we are here, Music Man Multimedia Studios, as a replacement.
Right.
And even if individuals still go over to that other side and start to penetrate over there for through the correct reasons, sometimes it's never too late to do the right thing. So maybe they might hire somebody in this upcoming summer's internship that's not in the sports department and actually pay them. So we're still going to exist, is my point. So now there's somebody over there inside, and then there's still a space where it's going to be unfiltered in a way where there's checks and balances.
Because that's really what the whole nuts and bolts of that allyship part is also, right? Is that we have to change the culture of other spaces. So it's not always enough, although necessary, to create our own space. But we know that we live in America, right? We know that we have to change or push to change the culture of everything else around us. That is our burden to bear, right? Is to put people up on game on what they should already be doing. So it is amazing to make sure that we have our own outlets, but it's also not a bad idea to have people in those spaces to recreate and redesign those cultures. And I think that that's why diversity and inclusion things are important, because you have to also allow for people in their ally space to understand how to redo what's not working there.
And a lot of times, I'll say it's not our job to right their wrongs. They need to self-correct themselves as well.
And you also have to have people of color in those spaces that are willing to speak to what it is that we're upset about.
And people of color who recognize that they're people of color.
Also important. Yeah. It's also important.
Ralph Rodriguez says, how important is proper media training for our young professionals on the rise?
So important. I think that we have to create opportunities to, Shonda Rhimes says this, and Issa Rae says it in her master classes, that you have to give people the tools to be this next generation, right? We want people to be aspiring writers and movie directors, and we want all of the arts and culture to stay in Harrisburg, but we don't have those internship opportunities, right? There should be somebody in the back watching you putting these things together. There's somebody who can just sit and watch and understand how important perfecting the craft is, because it's not enough to have our own stuff. We have to make sure that our stuff is rising to the level of professionalism as anything that's desired, right? We can't keep having jank stuff and just being like, oh, we're a Black business, we got to stick together. No, it's jank. So we have to make sure that in everything we're doing as best as possible, we are creating the best quality that showcases that we are of quality, right? So we I think have to also set our expectations of, we're not going to provide mediocre because we don't want the image of us to be mediocre either.
Right. And we're not going to tolerate mediocre as well from those outlets, because we know we're not mediocre.
Right. And we're not perfect. So no one's perfect, right? So if you have a couple jank days, that's fine. But I think that the overall impression of things should be that we are willing to provide ourselves quality. Like we're worth that much to ourselves.
We were talking about the fact that we understand that we can check us and we also can defend us.
Mm-hmm.
And that reminded me about why, I get so much fire, in my belly simply because I remember Miss Sandra K. Mauston was, Harrisburg City Councilwoman, was running for Dauphin County Commissioner, and the Patriot News and Reed team, they basically went in on her. And I was just waiting. I was just like, all these black male lawyers, all these black males around here said, yeah, I know they're getting ready to go in on these dudes. And nobody said anything. And I'll never forget seeing her. I was campaigning. I ran, came across her door. And I was like, oh, Miss Mauston. And she was just not engaged anymore. And I have vowed, and this is new. I've never said this to her, but I have vowed at that moment that we won't be disrespected by the Patriot News or the newspapers or the news media anymore. I remember the Bruce Bond incident where it was during Martin Luther King holiday, and the little white girl, obviously called in and was talking about doing and participating in this, and the question was asked, why do you want to do that? And of course they slapped him on the wrist. He went away for a little while, landed safely, came back. Tom Druce, state representative, kills Mr. Kenneth Kane, vehicular homicide, basically as a state rep, goes off, basically, did some time, but was taken care of. There's things I can talk about. Former Treasurer John Campbell. I'll talk about Brad Kaplinski, Bruce Weber, George Hartwick, Jeff Hayes, but they don't seem to continue to stay in the media. We're not reminded about the white ills of Dauphin County. We're not reminded. And what I'm saying is, going back to your piece about journalism and being balanced and equitable and all that, it just seems like when it's Miss Sandra K. Mauston or Mr. Darnell Williams, who both were right in challenging the system and the powers that be, the Steve Reeves, Jeff McColl's, Ron Buxton's, they were vilified, and they were vilified with assistance from us.
But, and here, I'm trying, right? Because I'm not fully evolved as a woman. My tact is ridiculous, but I think
I happen to mention that this is unfiltered.
My journey now is in, I don't care how they report on white folk. I do not, right? My thing is, I just want you to make sure you get us right. Because here's the thing. When you criminalize or when you do whatever with the dominant culture, you know that there's still generations that are still like, but I want to be a good writer. When you tear down and dehumanize our leaders, that does something to the spirit of who we are, right? Like when I was little, my very first job was a Patriot News internship.
Whoa.
Back when the building was up and the spot across the street was a full-blown mailbox office, right? Like I was in there. I never wanted to be a writer before then. I was just like, I talk a lot, I'll get over it. But going in and seeing, and I worked in finances, so they just were like, don't go upstairs. But I got the chance to go upstairs and see writers doing things. And I was like, wow. And situations like this bring it full circle. So it's like, how do you kill a dream 101? You lift people's spirits to the idea of possibility, and then you do everything imaginable to completely crush the idea that there's a space of belonging there for me. Now, of course, I seen that there was no one who looked like me there. And I was like, well, one day I'm going to be there. And I write and I write and I write because I'm like, one day I'm going to be there. Until I realized it's not a space I'm supposed to be in. Because had it been a space that I was supposed to be in, they would have created space for us. So that's when I go, okay, I'm about to write over here. But I can't write over here because I can't fathom lowering my sense of self-worth. That's about quality, right? We have to provide quality to each other. So I could say, well, they don't have Black people in, but y'all, I'm gonna sit at this meeting to make sure I get a job. I could do that. My resume, I can take a loan and go somewhere and do that and think about Anna. But they have not created a space for my daughter. They still haven't created a space where my daughter can look at it and say, I can go there. There's no space for that.
So are you talking about just the Patriot News or American? We'll stop. We'll pause.
Tomato at this point.
And so, we laugh begrudgingly because I always say if we don't laugh, we kill.
It's our medicine.
It is, and figuratively. Kill is one of those things where
figuratively for y'all.
Yeah, newsflash.
Call the people.
Yeah. However, there are murderous insurrectionists that we have still charged in the other side of America with the attempted coup on January 6th.
And the one little boy that's missing now.
Oh yes, we won't talk Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse. We won't talk about that. Alrighty. So Ronald Johnson says sometimes our community takes us for granted because as long as there are Annas or Karls speaking up, the community feels they don't have to engage because it's always going to be handled by others. And that, I would just say to Anna's point earlier, I agree with of it being exhausting. I've sent you several things that clearly says taking care of yourself is not selfish. It's selfless. And you can't pour into someone else that which you don't have.
Right.
Somebody's not pouring into you. So talk a little bit about that. Ronald just sent that in.
I say this all the time. Y'all, people believe.
You're allowed to say it. Give it.
Y'all believe that we're talking, all of us, because some people are doing this, but you believe that everyone that's talking is talking because they want to be positioned somewhere. I would like nothing more, right? The amount of hours that I pour into other people that aren't my children, right? And not being able to nurture them, not being able to uplift their child, like their dad or do anything or just keep my family together. The amount of hours I spend outside of myself, I would want nothing more than to share this responsibility to other people. But I can't find those people. Those people that don't want to be propped up or be in a position or are doing it because it's a political cycle or are doing it because they want to have unlimited clout or are doing it because they want to right? As soon as we find those people, shut me the hell up, right? I by no means, and this is me, because I know some people were like, I'm a die always talking. That's cool. You're never going to grab any microphone from that person. But there are more people that are like me, that are like, I talk this much because I have to, because no one else is saying it. And the moment someone else says it, I'll say it less. The moment someone else starts going live and talking about this and not pandering, I'll stop.
So what did I say to you when we first met? I was like, thank you. It was one of those things where I was like, as the fat old gray guy, I'm willing to give you what it is that I have. Now, you might not understand or know, and I'm willing to help you walk through that. And I told you, watch out for the people that's coming to you, recreating themselves, doing this, that, and the other. We had this conversation. Those of us, and I'll never forget Bishop Ravenel, God rest his soul. I was having a conversation one day with him in his office, and he clearly said to me, he was like, Karl, look, he was like, it's not that people want to stay in the way. He's like, it's not that people don't trust the younger generation like yourself and others. He was like, we just don't want to be forgotten.
And that's real.
And,
where is your place once you don't?
Right.
Right.
And that one of the reasons I'm mentioning it now is because I said to him that day, as long as I have breath, Bishop Ravenel will never be forgotten, and I mean that. He was real enough to say that to me, so I'm going to continue to remember that. I remember he told me, we like you with that raspy voice. We like you. You're right, but we just he got right up in my face. He was like, you just got to cut those rough edges off you. And I was just like, but he took time out for me.
Right.
Whether I was in the mayor's office, whether I was, running the coalition, whatever it was, he took time to meet with me. I would go, people didn't know that. I would still go up, sit and talk with him, get some of that. Some of that get right.
I think we have amazing people that are emerging, right? We have leaders that have kind of been here doing it, and we have leaders that are emerging, right? I think my first thought takes me to Bowley, right? Tamika, I always call her Bowley. Bowley West, you know who you are.
I think she was on. I missed the question.
Yeah.
So, let me say, I think her question was separating the personal character and the community character. Okay, here we go. Do you feel personal character can impact community character? Many seem to struggle with this separation.
Yes and no. I think that there are some things let me back up. There are emerging people, and I think what's necessary for those emerging people is to be able to have elders that are willing to train, right? Elders that are willing to not hold on to what they have, but share it, right? In our village, we had older women that were sharing stories because they're not going to be here forever. And my thing is the elders that are holding on to their position so that they will not be forgotten. If you do not give all that you are and all that you have learned to a person younger than you, and you do not instill in them what is necessary, your tomorrow is not promised. And I would rather you be remembered for the mentor, like, yo, I learned this from this person, than to be forgotten because you were so stingy with what you had that you were like, if I let this go, I'll be forgotten. You're going to be forgotten if you don't pass it down.
What is something no one has ever seen in Torco? No one has ever seen the funeral procession with a U-Haul truck. We're going to take a commercial break on that one. Please continue to call in, send your comments, 717-903-8760. We're here at Music Man Multimedia Studios with our special guest, the young lioness, Miss Anna White.
I like that. I'm going to get that on my shirt.
It's all yours.
Hello, this is Juanita Edrington Grant coming to you from the Harrisburg Uptown Building, 1821 Fulton Street, the former Hamilton Health Center building. We are classified as the Hub in Harrisburg, PA. You will now see a brief video of what we have named the Castile Edrington Community Room. It's on the second floor, 5th Street entrance of our building at 1821 Fulton Street. We're providing this video to you so that you can get a brief glimpse of our newest addition to our building, which is a room that we are allowing to be used for several different occasions, be it educational seminars, conferences, family dinners. We do have a capacity of holding at least 100 people, which is 10 tables, 100 chairs, or a professional corporate setup. And we're looking to place this information on the Hub website within the next couple of weeks so that you can see more of the advertisement, a price list, and the different information that you may want to know about renting this space. This space was designed by TLC Work-Based Training and TLC Renovation and Construction. Owner and CEO is Tori Castile. Yes, another one of the great projects created by Tori Castile. If you want to get in touch with us, please feel free to call me at 717-889-6377. Look forward to speaking to you from the Hub.
Okay, welcome back. We're going to jump back into our questions from Ms. Tamika Wesley. Again, do you feel personal character can impact community character? May seem to struggle with this separation. Many seem to struggle.
And I said yes and no. So I think that's our biggest thing is people are like, well, that's who I am professionally. That's who I am personally. That's not who I am professionally. There are some spaces where who you are doesn't matter, right? Like I don't need to know if you have any ideologies if you are serving me food, right? But when it comes to community impact, when it comes to things that require like respect, honesty, integrity, things like that, that's who you are at your core. So I think that a lot of people are like, you don't have to like someone, but you have to be able to work with them. No. So yes, sometimes we do use a lot of personal issues to not be able to work with people, and that's trash, and we got to do better. But also, it's perfectly okay for me to say your personality at the heart of who you are, your character. Your character lacks the integrity for me to align myself with you. And there's no apologies necessary for that.
Right. And that's real.
You are scum and I can't. And that's okay. And some people will feel that way about me, right? I have to answer to who I am. Right. And that means that I will risk connections with people based off of who I am. That person will suffer the same consequence.
I agree. I mean,
you don't need to build bridge with everybody.
Newsflash, right there. Repeat. You don't need to build bridges with everybody.
You just need to not sabotage another person. That's what you need to do if you don't get along with them, right? So I'm never going to step into a space that I know I don't respect someone and cause ruin to their program. I'm never going to be bashing someone's whatever, unless you did something nuts. But I'm going to discontinue caring because I don't need to throw you off of your lane. I just can't have you performing in mine.
Yeah, you know what? And
stop asking us to do that.
Yeah. So I'll just go to Pastor Miller, David T. Miller here. He asks, what is the expectation of the churches? You have another drink.
To gather yourselves first, right? There is a disconnect. What's happening in the world is that more and more people are becoming educated to the religion and the rituals that have kept African Americans intact way before we arrived here. So as more people start connecting to our roots, and more people start to understand the role that Christianity specifically played in enslavement of an entire people, people will start denouncing that religion because of the effects that it has had in negatively influencing our community. Having said that, churches have a hard time not being archaic. You say, come as you are, but then when I come as I am, it's an issue. If I come into a church and I don't have a good experience there because the church feels like I'm at a club or a social event, like you're talking about me, I can't be myself, right? So churches have a responsibility to be a safe space, but churches also have to do the work of, are you creating a space that is acceptable to the values and the ideologies that you say go with everyone is accepted? We are respecting people. We are advocating for people, right? I remember when I was going to church in the 90s, they utilized that as spaces to get people to go vote, right? There were really kind of social justice hubs in a way that they're not now. So I would love for the church to return back to empowerment, but at the core of who you are, creating a safe space for people to be able to come honestly and openly as who they are in 2021, right? Whether that be gay, straight, whatever. Who they are at their core doesn't need to be altered, and we need to stop playing gods on earth.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think where I am, churches and other leaders, church leaders and other leaders, need to ensure that they have the political will and courage to be the leaders that they profess to be outside of Sunday.
Right.
I would simply say the division between church and state is so that the state doesn't tell the church what to do, not that the church doesn't tell the state what to do.
Yeah.
If that were not the case, we wouldn't have all these politicians walking through black churches during political season. And the lack of political will and trying to hide behind a banner of, well, I just don't want to lose my 501c3, is not tolerable anymore, because you can still be an advocate without endorsing. Yeah. And so, no, a church should not endorse, or that may risk your 501c3. But you can advocate for issues. You can bring people to the table in a safe space, in a social justice space, creating a social justice agenda.
Right. And educate.
Exactly.
As long as those sermons are, you can throw something in there.
Something education. So we have Jamie Janelle. Why can't we utilize City Hall as a community headquarters for our nonprofit programs for our youth? And I don't know. I mean, from our perspective, we've tried.
So Jamie, I think this is a question that you or Lewis posed on you all's post. So I'm not sure if the answer is something you're looking for us to say, or if it's a general question that you have. I will say, for me, nonprofits have no space in City Hall. I think that nonprofits are functioning just fine, and they have their space. What they don't have is funding. So perhaps somebody in City Hall can help address why funding doesn't get to nonprofits, or why advocacy doesn't get to nonprofits. There's no need for nonprofits to move into a space of oppression. There is space for City Hall to do their job and allocate funding appropriately to the nonprofits, because we've been here. We don't need a hub. We don't need a space. We don't need a community center, right? They have spaces. What they need is funding and advocacy and respect and to be heard. So I don't know what floor of City Hall that happens, but let us know what floor that is.
Shout out to a hell of an answer.
Just petting my mane here.
This is a fun space. That's what I'm saying. Do you have any questions? I don't have to answer all the questions, from our perspective, in light of this conversation, how important is a platform like this?
Everything. It's everything. It's everything because we're allowed to say, like you keep saying, it's a free space, but that's the point. We have to be able to find spaces in Harrisburg where we can be unapologetically Black, right? The reason why BSUs are so important and predominantly white institutions is because it lets us plan without fear of retaliation. It provides that safe space. Now, it's not a secret. It's just a space where you don't have to explain yourself. It's a space where people get it. And we need to start creating more of those spaces. Now, we oftentimes think that needs to be in clubs. Like, why don't we have our own club? We need to be able to breathe. Yes, but things like the Good Brothers idea. Yes. Why don't we have spaces where we can be unapologetically Black in literature, where we don't have to search for that one random book that they might put out in February, right? Creating spaces where we can be unapologetic and free is necessary, on top of helping to cultivate those other spaces where we are bound by way of code switching.
Yeah. So, for the sake of discussion, we talk about, the current political season's coming up. We talk about networking, navigating systems. We talk about all that. What do you see as some of the challenges? We've talked about the then, basically the now. What do you see as next? Basically, honing in on everything that we've been discussing today, or every single thing, but based on our questions. We didn't get any phone calls, but based on our questions and our interaction today and our sidebar conversations and commercial, what do you profess to be next or envision being next?
I think that Harrisburg is this is the year where we make or break. I don't know what it is about this year. I don't know if it's because nationally we have been so wild. I don't know if it's because we're in the middle of a pandemic and 2020 was wild, but I feel like this is the year with leadership, with everything, that we are either going to choose to consistently be who we have always been to our demise, or we're going to very intentionally rise up and be who we are supposed to be, as a unit, and bring back what it is that we're supposed to do. Why not us? Why aren't we deserving of that? So I think we have more people, and shout out to YPOC, we have more professionals that are staying, that we are creating space for. So I think what's next is continuing to provide space where we can be safe, where we can be honored, where we can be heard, and continuing, this is an ally shout out, continuing to provide the necessary resources and outlets by way of funding. And people that are allies are always kind of caught up, why do you guys always bring up money? It's 244 plus years of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of unpaid labor. The only way to make that right is to supplement, right? So we're not just asking for money because it's that's the only thing that we can ask for, but until we can position ourselves, yes, free labor needs to start. There's a bill here. There's a bill. So I think that creating those spaces where we can open, because people are always asking, how do I ally, right? Creating spaces where we can ask for that funding, having people commit to funding, and then utilizing that funding to create spaces like this, to create spaces like Good Brothers, to create spaces like even the veggie spot across the street, right? Our quality of life is improving in Harrisburg because we give a damn about ourselves first. And what we are willing to do to give a damn about ourselves has changed, because I feel like we were so close to losing that. It was scary. We were so close to being okay with enslaving ourselves and succumbing to our own trauma in Harrisburg. And then there were people that said, no, this is not how we're going to end. So we need to continue to be those people that are I refuse to let you guys die. I refuse for your mind, your body, your spirit to die here. You are worth something, and we have to prove that.
Great segue. Here we go. For Miss Anna White, how can we help you personally and or get behind your leadership? Paul's second piece is politics in your future. And I'm not making this up. It's right here.
Who said that?
I think the table said it. Now they're commenting on the actual Facebook page.
Here's what I will say. I have as much as I speak about issues, I speak about issues in a way as a sociologist, right? I'm really good at strategy. I'm really good at looking at someone and looking at a situation and seeing how we can create the best outcome. Politics is not about that, right? So at one point I did want to, I don't know if I shared this with you, I wanted to run for district judge. I probably felt that way for about a month, because the moment I said it out loud outside of my head, right, and we're talking, I moved to make sure that I was within the space, because I didn't want to run against another African-American woman. Like, that's how crazy my loyalty was. And I was like, I'm not fit to run against another person that looks like me in the mirror, right? So I moved to be able to run against somebody else. But the moment I said loyalty, that's the sacrifice, right? I'm not going to dishonor her just because I want a position. So I moved, and the moment I said it outside of my mouth, I realized why I hate politics. My heart isn't built like that. My heart isn't built like, well, this money comes with this. I don't know how to do that. And also my mouth is too crazy. So I feel like some spaces of politics ties my hands. I'm a very anti-caged bird singing type of woman. So if there was a space where I could be myself, right? Where I could be myself, where you know what you're getting when I get there, I would love that opportunity to be able to help our people. Whatever political position that is, whatever social service position that is, shoot them my way. But I'm not going to interview for anything else ever that I need to present myself outside of Anna. So if Anna is allowed to be in that position, yes, by all means, I'm interested in hearing what needs to happen. But until then, I'm good. I'm good helping, and I'm also good helping other people that have political aspirations but need a way with words, right? I'm also okay with, I don't have to be the politician. I'm not here to do that piece. I'm here to do the work or to help someone else do the work properly.
Great points.
Can we get back to how y'all can help me?
Yes.
My Cash App is $vision, the number 4 words. That's all one word. So you can help me like that, because intellectual labor is still labor. And I think the way that you can help my business is I do a lot of diversity and inclusion programming and training. I do a lot of writing. I do a lot of resume and training and development opportunities. Utilize my name when you get into spaces. Utilize my name when you know that there's a need somewhere. Also, explain to them how I'm coming, because I'm all the way live. But that is the best way to honor the people that do this work, is to have us in spaces that honor our work, that honor our paid work, because it's intellectual labor. It's not intellectual gift giving. And just having people recommend people. That's so important.
That word of mouth is huge.
When people put my name into spaces, I'm like, yo, because you don't have to, because it's dog eat dog out here, and sometimes low-key trifling in the city, right? So anytime you can say, I know the perfect person for that, instead of being like, I'll do it when I can't, right? So I know the perfect person, right? Like if somebody's like, oh, I need to get some shoes. Okay, go to Mean Girls over there, right there in Stilton. Oh, I need to write this. Oh, I'm busy right now, but Jillian has this. Oh, I want to get a book. Okay, but I'm consistently throwing people off of me to other people. We just have to get better at that. So that's how you can help me. When you are listing off names on Facebook about who can do what, value and honor me outside of the basic Facebook accolades.
Heavy. Miss Sylvia Regal, I think there should be talk about our next superintendent for the Harrisburg School District. Why? With the new leadership in office and time running out with the receiver, who is really absent with what's really going on. So
you take that, because you know how I feel about the school board and receivership.
Well,
I mean,
you didn't.
Yeah.
Wait, newsflash, you didn't go through a lawsuit, banned from running 5 years, 40,000 court costs. There's trauma.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and then some of the same people are still trying to come back around.
Okay.
Take a breath. Drink time.
Triggered.
Put in seriousness.
Put in seriousness.
Yeah.
We have to start thinking about the superintendent, because receivership is almost up. Have you guys asked the school board what's going on, or like the school board members, right? So my thing is, we don't know what the needs are going to be. I mean, we know, but we need to be clear on what's been happening. I think people think like, oh, we're in receivership, la-di-da. I'll wait until it's our turn to lead again, right? No, what are they doing, right? What are the rules that they're working on right now? How much of the school board members' input are they asking for, like they said that they would? How much community involvement is still occurring or not occurring, right? So we have to assess and appraise what's been happening so far under receivership. And then we're going to be able to say, oh, okay, we're looking for the next superintendent to be able to do this, right? And much more than just personal qualities. Like they can't run off with our money again, or they can't do this, or they can't do that, right? Like don't speak to the trauma of it. Look at what's going on right now and what needs to happen and position the next person to be able to take care of that on day one when they come back into the mix.
So not only are we talking about the full breadth and depth of the election season, whether that's school board, mayor, city council, but we need to also clearly understand that, controller and and treasurer are also key positions. So I'm sure we have some Black CPAs, some Latino CPAs, in other professions that we need to understand the power of being controller inside city government as well. The power of,
it's not just city council.
Right. It's not just the mayor's office. It's not. There's things that city council and the mayor may, newsflash, agree on. If it doesn't get the controller's approval and the treasurer's approval, it's not going anywhere. And so there are branches, there are departments embedded within city government that, we need to really educate people about and on, and how there are still people there that have, access and power that we don't even recognize. Yeah. Like these boards, these, zoning, especially,
spaces where we're not at, and people aren't even whispering that we have a chance to be in because they don't want to.
Harrisburg Redevelopment Authority. There are spaces. Shout out to Basir and Kamika and those that are really heavy involved with the comprehensive plan.
Basir Vincent, please Google him, get him everywhere. I'm now bringing you other work, but that's the genius.
He's there. So our Wednesday groups is one thing with the women, but we have a by Saturday meeting as well. Bi-weekly Saturday meeting, and he brings a lot of value to the group.
Genius.
So that's something else. We're gonna take a quick commercial break. Here with the line, Miss.
Please don't get that wrong.
My apologies. The young lioness, Miss Anna White. Hosted by yours truly, special guest here today, Miss Anna White, Harrisburg Young Lioness. We are here. We're going to wrap it up. Can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thank you.
Having this interaction. We are definitely headed, from my perspective, with young leadership such as yourself, in the right direction. I don't mean pointing in the right direction. I mean headed, movement in the right direction. What I'd like to offer now is an opportunity for you to have some parting shots, some parting words, and this is not goodbye. This is see you later, because you will be back.
Yeah. So first and foremost, thank you all to everyone in the behind the scenes, and thank you to you for always presenting a seat for me. It's so important to be able to have people that are not afraid to have these difficult conversations, right? So I always thank you when I'm able to be my authentic self, and for you to bring me along into spaces like this. So thank you so much. I think I want to end by saying that the work that we have to do is never easy. It is thankless. Sometimes you feel burnt out by it. It's important for us to take care of ourselves, but to remember that we have an obligation to take care of the village. It's important for us to realize why villages were so important in the first place, why communities are so important in the first place, and being together and connected and letting go of what needs to happen, right? So I don't know if we need to have more kumbaya trainings, let me know. But at some point we have to start mending and healing and accepting the idea that we are sick and traumatized in a lot of different ways. And acknowledging that is key. But what we do after that, in righting wrongs and apologizing and forgiving and embracing and connecting, is going to be what saves this city. It's going to be what makes younger children feel like they have a chance here. It's going to be what older women and older men can look to create that village and to make women feel protected and honored, and for men to feel valued and uplifted, right? So we have such a responsibility to self that's in our bloodline. We can't even get rid of it if we wanted to, right? Even though we're tired and y'all irk, I feel it in my spirit that I can't let somebody go out the way that they go out, right? So I think that if we tap into the part that doesn't allow the next man to fail, and really thinks of the heart and the good intention of the next person, but also creating safe and healthy boundaries, and also understanding that your work doesn't need to happen with everyone, and practicing discernment and seeking a higher power and wanting to be your best self, that's where we're headed. We're headed in making sure that people are the best version of themselves and to be whole again. And once that happens, everything else happens, right? Like politics get better, community get better, villages get better. And you creating the best and whole version of yourself, everything else gets better. And if we have to do that one person at a time, one forgiveness layer at a time, one baby dad at a time, one beef at a time, one uptown hillside reconnection at a time, do it. And everyone can mend one relationship. Sooner or later, we will start to feel like we have a village again. So that is the call that I have to each of you that feel that people like me are the only people that can do it. No, everyone can gather themselves and get people together again. Your clique can extend outside of yourself and start welcoming people in. Elders, reach out to young people. Young people, chill out. Listen to people who have had a life and experience before you. Once we start remembering what the purpose of a village, Harrisburg will start to see the fruits of his labor.
Heavy. Can't thank you enough. As I said, this might be ending this particular show, but you spoke to something earlier, and I wanted to just say that your words will never be caged here. Not at a seat at the table.
Yes.
Your words will never be caged with regards to having a space here to express yourself at Music Man Multimedia Studios. Shout out to the Lewis brothers, Craig and Conrad.
Yes.
And the one and only Chad Scott, always behind the scenes, lay low Chad Scott. The District Bar and Lounge. What I'll say is, moving forward, as we continue to close here, our next phases and our next steps that we'll be honing in on is we are going to have a drive-through petition signing for all candidates who are willing, who are running. We are going to put that date on our page. We're going to blast that out, and what we'll do is we'll have it set up in a way where we'll have safe social distancing. We're going to ask that you bring your own pen, and meaning if you're coming to sign petitions, we will list clearly the candidates who are running and who chose to come. We will have it set up outside where you can just come to the parking lot, see the candidate that you want, drive through, similar to the vaccine and or the testing.
Yeah.
And we will announce that will be done during the first week of petition signing. We will also post our identified candidates night that we will be having. Some will be virtual, some will be in-house. Socially distanced, of course, as you can see, we are practicing that, and we have larger tables and more barriers, more protectors, shields. So with that, we just like to thank you again for joining us here this Thursday, 6 to 8 for a seat at the table. We will be coming your way 2 times a week now. We will be coming to you from 6 to 8 on Mondays and Thursdays. Next week, we will be moving in on Monday with highlighting a stellar Black business as we continue to highlight our then, now, and next. And that'll be my old coach, Mike Elby, and a great mentor, Dan Elby, who run ARC, Alternative Rehabilitation Community a great resource, great business. They've employed many people, me being one, a way that I would make money on the weekends, come home, take care of my daughter one at a time. And so definitely we're going to highlight the LB's, Mr. Mike and Mr. Dan LB, and the great work they did around not only reentry before it was popular, but continuing to ensure that we had a career pathway into the legal system in terms of service. So again, thank you for joining us here on the Seat at the Table. Harrisburg's own, the young lioness, Miss Anna White.
What?